Hey, praise the Lord, guys. I'm Shaw Greenhorn. As they were in the way going up to Jerusalem, Jesus went before them and they were amazed. But as they followed, they were afraid. But then Jesus again took the 12 unto him and began to show unto them what things must shortly happen to him, saying, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of the chief priests and the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. And they shall mock him and scourge him and spit upon him and kill him, but he shall rise again the third day. So, while in the way, we just came from a scenario with the rich disciple, who tried to show unto Jesus that he was professing himself to be more than he was. Jesus told him, Go and sell all that thou hast, give unto the poor. And he walked away very sad. And we saw the disciples say unto him, But we have forsaken all and followed thee. So here we are going up to Jerusalem. So overall, right here, we really see, Jesus warning and preparing them. We just saw where he told Simon Peter the same very thing. Simon Peter took him and began to rebuke him. This shall not come unto thee. Far be it from thee, Lord. Jesus said, Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou savorest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of men. And even right before that, we saw where, he told them this, that behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners, and they shall kill him. And they were afraid to ask him. The Bible says that they were afraid to ask him. They ended up asking him about, who shall be the greatest. That's when he told them about, it's not he that shall be the greatest, let him be the least and servant of all. So really what we see here is Jesus, he's trying to drive home the point onto them. Because sometimes, when you have such a misconception that's been, so ingrained in your mind after years and years and decades, that thing, it doesn't get pulled out with one pull. If when they demolish old buildings, depending on how tall or big it was, that thing is not going to come down with one swing unless you use like maybe dynamite. A tree, depending how many years, decades, even centuries it's been around, the longer it's been around, the roots is going to go down deeper, it's going to be more entwined, it's going to be harder to pull out. And they're walking around with a lot of things inside of them, really, that it's not going in the same direction as Jesus' purpose. Why he came here, what he came here to do. And these things, they show themselves, from time to time. And that just shows you as a leader, even as, an example to people. Sometimes you'll see people with misconceptions. It just show its head in a little, peak. It just peep out just a little bit. And, depending on how you want others around you to be, you might just have to address certain things. You ever heard the saying, the tip of the iceberg? Because you can have a huge iceberg that's, in front of you when you're traveling by sea, during the cold, during the winter weather, depending on what part of the world you're sailing. And you'll see just a little piece of ice sticking out, not knowing that this thing is bigger than the ship itself. So Jesus, I believe he's seen enough for him to know there's some pulling that needs to be done. We've seen it directly when they asked, who shall be the greatest. We've seen it indirectly when he himself told them that he shall go up and be killed, and they get so sad. We've seen them get sad. We've seen Peter rebuke him. We've seen so many different reactions. So it's full time that Jesus, he takes this bull by the horn and settles it out. And you can see that no matter how much he told them, because look at the crucifixion, they all fled and left him, right? And they were all depressed. When he appeared unto them, he said, What manner of conversation is this that ye have one to another, that you walk and talk and are sad? So you see, even with this warning that he's about to give them right now, I still don't get it. If you understand Jesus, he came, what he came to lay down was so different than what we were so accustomed to. It would be like driving a car 100 miles an hour in one direction and going the exact opposite at the drop of a dime, at the drop of a pin of a needle, changing direction just like that. No slowing down, no braking, no reversing. And that would be impossible to do, right? But I believe, like I said, I believe that God, he learns over time. He put us on this earth, and God is wise. He does see the end from the beginning, and he does have wisdom. He can tell you a lot of things, but there are certain things that they have to be learned. No matter how smart you are, you could be God smart. There's still certain things that has to be learned. There's still certain processes that have to be respected, even if you are the Most High God. God knows why he had to send Jesus. There's no forgiveness of sins without the remission of the shedding of blood, right? God, he can't just say, okay, you're forgiven, you're forgiven, you're forgiven. But no, it required a sacrifice. When God saw the wickedness of man and he sent the flood in Noah's days, after he did it, he said, he repented. He said, I shall never again destroy the earth with a flood. Because what did he learn? That when they came and they repopulated, they went and they became just as evil. Nothing changed. All right, so that doesn't really help. So now, after enough years of observing mankind, God, he mixes wisdom with experience. Looking at the hearts of men wanting power to reign over people. They reign over people while the people work and support them. Because that's really what a king is, right? He gets, his money from the people. He eats the best all day. They see him, they worship him. I mean, what kind of system is that? So here's what we have now. You want to be great, you got to serve. You want to be revered and loved. Let it be because of what you did for the people. So here we see them heading up to Jerusalem. And he begins to tell them again that behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man, he shall be betrayed to the chief priests and scribes. They shall condemn him to death and then deliver him to the Gentiles. This condemning him by the chief priests and scribes and then delivering him to the Gentiles. If you were to look at it, you would understand that they are basically asking the Gentiles to do their dirty work. That's what they're doing. They're condemning him and sending him with this sentence on his head. But they are unable to execute it, because of the manner of death that they wanted him to suffer. We just saw where they brought unto him the woman taken in adultery, right? What did they say? This woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now the law of Moses bade us do what? The law of Moses bade us stone her. But what sayest thou? Saying this that they might have reason to accuse him. So they were allowed to stone people to death. He made himself the Son of God. That's one of the accusations. They had all right to stone him to death. But the scriptures said that he must be crucified. When it was in the days of King Saul, I think, somebody was, hung upon a tree. And they had to take them down before the sun went down, because they believed that a curse would come upon the land. Now, the Old Testament points to Jesus. Jeremiah being let down in the mire, Jesus being let down in the grave. Abraham taking Isaac to sacrifice him, Jesus being that sacrifice. The ram in the bush. You ever ask the question why? After God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son, it was just really a test. But why was the ram in the bush accepted? Because it was a representative of Jesus Christ. So the Old Testament, it points to him. And like I said, this scripture, a man cannot be left hanging, after sundown, or else they believe that curse will come upon the land. Because he shall be cursed, and then the land itself shall be cursed. Same thing was said about Jesus, right? That's why they pierced his side. They pierced his side to see if he was still alive. I mean, what a terrible way to tell if somebody's alive, right? Pierce their side and see if they scream out in pain. But by the time he was already dead. So this was a, illustration pointing towards him, that he should be hanging somewhere, be made to be taken down before the sun goes down. Bible says not one of his bones shall be broken. Bible says that not one of his bones shall be broken. They whipped him all night long. He was bruised and bleeding and bloody, but not one bone was broken. When they pierced his side, they might have pierced organs, but no bones were broken. Because the rule during crucifixion, if when the time came, sundown, and you were still alive, they would break your legs. So those thieves, they were still alive, so they had their legs broken. But because he was already dead, they just let him go. They just, gave him over to be buried. So like I said, these, chief priests and scribes, they had the Gentiles do their dirty work. Because you see, they didn't want to stone him to death. That was their thing, to stone people to death. First stoning we see in the Bible is in the Old Testament, that guy who was gathering sticks on the Sabbath. They stoned him to death because he needed to be crucified. And in their law, they actually said it. I forget. It's in one of the Gospels. They actually said that, it is not our law to put any man to death by crucifixion. If it was a matter of just stoning, they could have just stoned. They could have just took him. When they took him to the high priest's palace, I don't know, they could have took him outside and stoned him. I don't know, maybe they would have waited till the next day. But now they're having the Gentiles do their dirty work, passing judgment unto him and then delivering, him over unto them. That's how he ended up in the hands of Pontius Pilate. Neither of them wanted to touch him. Pontius Pilate's wife, telling him, I suffer many things in a dream because of this righteous man. See that thou have nothing to do with it. He took his hands and he washed it, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just man. So we see him describe what the Gentiles shall do unto him. They shall mock him and scourge him and spit upon him and kill him. The king of the Jews, your king. Overall, I would say their disbelief was tied to their interpretation of things. He's the Son of God. How can they overpower him and kill him? That's how they saw it. They saw it as him being overpowered. They really haven't been integrating everything that he's been teaching them and telling them. Because you would hear him tell them that I lay my life down, that no man taketh it from me. He told them time after time that this is why I came into the world. It's like I would say it's a fight or flight response for them. You ever been afraid of something no matter what? Nobody could talk you through it. They were afraid of him dying. I would say that. That's what happened. They were afraid of him dying. Certain people, like there's I believe it's called agoraphobia. People that are afraid of public places. People are afraid of airplanes. Now, if you take this person on an airplane, I mean, the anxiety that they have, they probably pass out. That's how afraid they are. It's not something that you can say, hold them by the hand and say, it's going to be all right. You see? I mean, we're just, the plane is not even moving yet. You see how slow it's moving? All right, we're just taking off. Look, you see, no matter how you try and talk them through it, their fear response is going to override and drown out everything that you're saying to them. And all they're ever going to be able to do is focus on the fear of that thing. And these disciples, they have a fear of him dying. He's always the one answering the questions. He's always the one doing the healing. When they couldn't cast the devil out of that little boy, the deaf and dumb spirit, and I brought him to the disciples and they could not cast him out. Jesus said, "Oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? When I am taken back, is this the thing that you guys are going to keep, doing?" He was their leader. He was the face of the brand. Anywhere they went, it was him they would follow. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. He was always the one they waited for. So let's get into these scriptures. It starts out saying, "And as they were in the way going up to Jerusalem, Jesus went before them, and they were amazed. Now as they followed, they were afraid. And then Jesus began to show unto them the things that should shortly happen unto him." So we're going up to Jerusalem. We saw where the chief priests and scribes from Jerusalem, when they came unto where he was, tempting him, asking him, for a sign, asking him by what means he doeth these things, just coming out of, malice and spite, really. So here he is in Jerusalem. We know that he goes through certain places. He returns to others, usually when the word is spread and he can get everybody in one location, everybody believing. Because maybe not everybody came out first time. But I guarantee you, when you see that blind man who was always blind, him walking around telling you about Jesus, I'm sure you're going to show up. When you see him talking to you, I guarantee you, no matter what you're doing, you're going to be there the second time. So like I said, we just got done dealing with this rich, disciple trying to show that he was all in. Jesus said, "Go and sell all that thou hast." He walked away so sad. He didn't even look back. He didn't even stand to argue. He just left. The disciples saying, "We are forsaken all. What shall be done for us?" So Jesus went before them. He's always leading the way, not just in the physical, but in the spirit. So many things are done in the spirit that, I believe that if the things done in the spirit, a book, was to be our, its own Bible, we wouldn't even begin to comprehend the things that were done in the spirit by Jesus. There would be so much to be told. So many roads destroyed, so many traps, so many strongholds holding back his people from moving forward. Pirates in the ocean, they'll block passages of the vessels, the ships, and you got to get an intervention from the military. Roadblock, traps people falling into, people being taken out. Generational curses. Jesus, in the spirit. The things that he did. Remember, he came. He said that my kingdom is not of this world. So he was building. That's what he was. Noah, he built that ark. And then, he preached 120 years. And yes, so only his family, his wife, sons, and their wives, went in, with the animals. So as Jesus led the way, oftentimes we'll see, when soldiers are patrolling through, that, they'll send, others in the front. They might be scouting for mines, landmines, but be on the lookout for certain things. So, Jesus, he's heading up to Jerusalem, and he went before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. So we see two things happening here. How can you be amazed and afraid at the same time? You're amazed at his boldness. You don't understand everything that's taking place in front of your eyes, but he's battling. It's not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, rulers of darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. What giants is he fighting right here? We know that when Goliath, he defied the armies of Israel 40 days. 40 days they ran and hid from Goliath until David came. Imagine watching Jesus battle all these Goliaths in the spirit. You're going to be amazed. It's like, wow, look at that. We've been held hostage for so long. We've been held captive for so long. And look at these things that's holding us. Is any of us able to rise up against these giants? To behold the battle, to see the punches being thrown, the swords being swung in the spirit, the heads being cut off by Jesus. But then, the fear, comes from the danger of them seeing these things, being afraid. It's the danger of these giants, of these things in the spirit, these traps, these things that he's overcoming. The Bible is not going to tell you all these things, right? I would say that if we could write a book about the things done in the spirit by John the Baptist and by Jesus, and even by all these prophets, because they were needed, they were paving the way. Slowly but surely, they all paved the way for Jesus. And what were they doing? They were certain things up. They were removing certain things. They were, rearranging certain things. I don't know. Maybe the first prophet came. He built, the foundation. Maybe he even dug the ground. It's the other prophet that, poured the concrete. And we haven't even started, with anything related to the structure of the house itself. So Jesus went before them and they were amazed. You ever had a car and, you drive this car every day, but then, somebody, one of your friends maybe drove it and, you saw them do certain things with it. And he's like, whoa, I didn't know it could do this. Because, they walk this path, so often, so frequent. But, we didn't know that this could be done. We didn't know that we could take this pathway. We didn't know that this was holding us back. We didn't know we could break free from that. But then also being afraid because it's Jesus that's doing all this. I mean, what if one of these things were to come at us sideways? Would we be able to defend ourselves? Even while David was fighting Goliath, the people were still afraid. But then he took them aside and began to show unto them things that should happen unto him. Again, it's not the first time. This is, I count, let me see, how many times? At least maybe 3 or more, if not more. And it's going to go right over their head, because when he gets crucified, you see by their reaction, you'll see that, because if they were to receive it as he's telling them, then they would rejoice, right? They would say, well, he did say that he was going to die. But don't forget, he also said he's going to rise again. So they would have been focusing on the rising again part, but they were stuck on the death part. And that's why Jesus had to come, because nobody else would have done it. The very people he told everyone what he was here to do, and they still couldn't receive it. You think he could have sent anybody else? He could have asked anybody else. That's why Jesus had to come himself. The next part says, saying that, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man is delivered into the chief priests and scribes, and they shall condemn him to death and deliver him unto the Gentiles. So we're going up to Jerusalem, and we know we're going up to Jerusalem. Behold, I am delivered unto the chief priests and scribes. This delivering, this is fate. This is destiny. This is not a steal away, devil coming to kill, steal, and destroy. No, this is ordained. I am delivered. If you remember, forget what he said. I believe he said that, for which one of these works do you stone me? And they said, not for any works, but because you say you are the Son of God. And then he said, well, if I tell you of, earthly things, or shall you believe me if I tell you of, and you believe me not? Shall you believe me if I tell you of heavenly things? And he offended them, and they took up stones ready to stone him, and he walked right through the midst of them. In one version, it says they wanted to drop him head first off this cliff, but he just walked right through them because it was not his time. It's not his time. Nobody could touch him. They couldn't even ask him for taxes. They had to ask Peter. Peter, does not thy master pay tribute? So I am delivered into their hands. It's time, and I can't just be undelivered out of their hands. When he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, what did he say? Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Father, if it be possible, undeliver me from this assignment. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou will. These two things go right hand in hand. You go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man, being the Son of God, he was the Son of God. It was not, Joseph's, seed that made Jesus. He was the Son of God. But why does he call himself the Son of Man? Adam was, if we check the genealogy of Jesus, it say Joseph, who was the son of this, who was the son of that, who was the son of Solomon, who was the son of David, all the way back to Moses, who was the son of Noah, who was the son of Abraham, who was the son of Seth, who was the son of Adam, who was the son of God. Adam was the son of God. Jesus is also the son of God. But Adam, he came from the dust. For the Lord God formed Adam from the dust. Adam was formed as a grown man. Adam never had a childhood. Adam was fully grown at 1 day old. But if I was to challenge that statement, I would say, well, how do we know that he didn't form him as a baby or as a little boy and then have him grow up, giving him his wife, way later? No time frame or time passage of time reference is given. We assume that he was formed as a man. But if you were to go back and read the whole thing, asking the question, what if it were possible that he was also formed as a boy? And God spent, a lot of time with him. He just hung with him all day. I mean, you couldn't find any evidence against that he was formed as a boy, right? As a little boy. But if he was formed, he couldn't have been formed as an infant. I mean, who would, feed him, breastfeed him? Or, God would have to provide something for him, right? So, we would understand that Adam, he was formed as a grown man. Jesus being the Son of Man, indicating that he came from man as well as from God. Adam was purely from God, God only. Jesus came from man, from Mary. I often say, if you want to check Jesus' genealogy, don't look at Joseph. Joseph had no part in Jesus. You want to check Jesus' genealogy, look at Mary. Mary is who you said, who was the daughter of whosoever, was the son of whosoever, or the daughter, whatever you wanna. If you wanna list the females going all the way back, you wanna check Jesus' genealogy, you look at Mary, because she probably had more to do to contribute to his genetic makeup. Joseph had nothing to contribute. Joseph touched not Mary until after she had born the firstborn child. They call his name Jesus. Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man is delivered, into the chief priests and scribes, and they shall condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. So they're attaching this death sentence unto him, which they're gonna do their best to make sure is irreversible and unpardonable. How they did this, when they sent him to Pontius Pilate, they had many in the crowd saying, away with this man, crucify him. They saw it all the way through until he was taken in into the central hall by the soldiers. They even riled up the crowd saying, ask for Barabbas and crucify Jesus. Now, The question I would ask to these, these chief priests and scribes, these are supposed to be holy men of the cloth, and here they are telling lies. You're telling lies to put somebody to death. Did anybody stop and be objective and say, what is this that we're doing? Are we not honorable men? Is it not our, job to teach morality? Is not our job to teach godliness and honesty and, upliftment and righteousness? What is this thing that we're doing? If they were to go and be a part of Barabbas, because he did insurrection and many died when he did. If they were to go and be a part of his gang, robbing and killing and stealing, would they not say, well, we're not supposed to be, I mean, they would have the sense to know that, we're not supposed to be doing this, right? Why could they not have the sense to understand that they shouldn't be doing this also? All right, so the next scripture says, and they shall mock him and scourge him, spit upon him and kill him, but he shall rise again the third day. So this was his portion, given unto him by God. All these things is for our benefit. Mocking him, that's for our peace. Whipping him, that's for our healing. Condemning him is for our forgiveness. Killing him for our ascension, when he returns, whether we be in the grave or whether we be caught up in the clouds. It is often said that, he became a curse for us, that we might be blessed. He took our place. You see, in the Garden of Eden, when God told Adam and Eve, do not touch or eat of the fruit, or you shall die. When God said die, they had no frame of reference, because nothing had ever died. I wonder if even a fruit from a tree, when it fell off, if it even rot when it hit the ground, when it was there for a while. I would ask that question. Now, let me ask you a question. You've never seen somebody from Jupiter, right? If I were to ask you to describe to me what a person from Jupiter looks like, I'm talking about the planet, what would you describe unto me? Describe unto me what a person from Jupiter looks like. Would you be able to give me any sort of description? Well, God telling these, Adam and Eve that they shall die, it's the same thing. They have no frame of reference, no where to start, no point in time, nothing. Death is not just the physical death. Death is suffering. Death is, having diseases, cancer, diabetes, sexual transmitted diseases, world wars, genocide, hatred, racism. All these things are death. Poverty, hunger, being ostracized, left out, depression, suicide. All these things are death. Death is not just, the closing of the eyes going into the grave, but it was just Adam and Eve. What do you mean world war? It's just me and my wife. What kind of world war? Who's going to be fighting against who in this world war? No frame of reference. So they shall mock him. They shall taunt him. The devil, he's so spiteful. And midst of him being spiteful, he's also so ignorant. Knowing nothing. Not realizing that these very things that he's doing to Jesus is going to be the very things that free us. Because, he's going to be the one, to run out and be so violent and be so sarcastic, to be so spiteful. No, they're not just going to kill you, Jesus. No, they're going to spit on you. They're going to taunt you. They're gonna push you to the point where you're gonna want to fight back, and that's when we do it even more. I am Straw Greenhorn.